If this isn't aliens, what is it? I'll speak to someone who might know. He's been tracking aerospace threats for the Pentagon for years. Stay with us. So new tonight, sources tell CNN that an upcoming government report says U.S. intelligence officials have found no evidence confirming UFOs that were seen by U.S. Navy pilots in recent years were, in fact, alien spacecraft. But that report making no definitive assessment as to what the objects might actually be. Are there now even more questions about what's flying in our skies? Here to discuss, Luis Elizondo, former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Sounds like the right person for this conversation. Welcome to the show. I'm glad that you're here. Luis,
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And sources are telling CNN that the upcoming Defense Department report does not actually determine what these unidentified flying objects actually are. It doesn't say that they are alien spacecraft, but it doesn't say that they're not. It doesn't rule it out. It's going to add some fuel to the debate that's already going on, isn't it?
Well, indeed it is. The U.S. government has already stated now for the record, according to some of these inside sources, that this is definitely not some sort of secret U.S. technology. So that argument now is finally, for many decades now, is finally off the table. So that really only leaves two options, doesn't it? And that is, one, it's some sort of foreign technology that has somehow managed to leapfrog us, or it's something completely and totally different. And I think it's important that when we look at this, we also look at the context of the U.S. government's involvement in this topic historically. And so there is truly documentation now that is coming forward. Some of my team members have been able to uncover through the FOIA process, and that also, by the way, has been available for quite some time, that demonstrates that the U.S. government has actually indeed been dealing with this issue for over 70 years. And that's a little bit problematic, because if we say this is foreign adversarial technology, we know that the Russians, after the Berlin Wall came down, had shared a lot of their UFO files with us. And so we know they had the same problem we did. Furthermore, if that leaves, let's say, a country like China, that would then, in essence, we would have to consider the fact that China or another country now has had some sort of beyond next generation technology for the last 70 years. And as we know, that's a really hard secret to keep. And furthermore, that these technologies have been deployed over controlled U.S. airspace. So I think you're right. There's a lot more questions now we have to ask ourselves. And let's be clear, too, that the report did not say this wasn't some sort of alien type or extraterrestrial technology. It simply said it could not rule it out. And I think that's an important caveat.
I want to go to that data you're talking about that history, to give people the context you're speaking of, because you actually did share new declassified reports with our team, and they detail intelligence on UFOs resembling something like a tic-tac going all the way back to 1947. You had a CIA report from 1953 says Swedish airline pilots encountered a silver or white flying lozenge traveling at high speeds. You've got an FBI report from 1964 that details a UFO that's shaped like a butane tank. And then some Navy pilots say they have seen something like a flying tic-tac in recent years as well. So, what do you think of this pattern, the similar characteristics over time? What's your thought?
Well, first of all, thank you for doing your homework. I think a lot of media has been lazy about this topic, and I also want to thank you for your courage for reporting this topic. I do know that there's still some stigma and taboo associated with it. I think the fact that you have pilots separated by decades, if not generations, reporting the same type of observations, describing the same, what is essence, the same object, a 40-foot long, whether it's a white flying butane tank or a white flying tic-tac or a white flying lozenge. At the end of the day, they're describing the same thing. They're just describing it from the context of the generation that they're growing up in. So we're definitely, I think it's safe to presume that we're seeing the same objects in the sky time and time and time again. And obviously that's a concern, because if the argument is that there is some sort of foreign technology that has somehow mastered this and is 1,000 years ahead of the United States, and oh, by the way, has been demonstrating this technology for the last 70 years, I think we've got bigger problems on our hands.
Well, speaking of that, because of the pattern, because of the overtime you're talking about, if we don't have an answer soon on what exactly these flying phenomenon are, is that a failure for our national security?
Well, it is certainly it would be a failure, an intelligence failure that would eclipse 9/11 by orders of magnitude if it turns out that this is some sort of foreign adversarial technology. But I think it's important. We have to keep all options on the table. There's a lot of information right now that suggests it's not. And I know as hard as that may be to digest for some people, as an intelligence officer, it is important that we approach this topic objectively. We have to really try to keep our emotions out of this. There's a lot of preconceived narratives we as Americans have about this topic. Part of that is because of the socialization of this topic over the last 70 years. I think we have to really keep an open mind, keep all options on the table. And if it turns out that this technology is not foreign adversarial, well, then we need to be prepared to have that conversation as well.
Well, NASA says that they're now looking into UFOs as well. I mean, but does there need to be a whole of government approach to figure out what these things are? I mean, especially if they could be intelligence gathering tools for other countries. Is whole of government approach
Absolutely.
the right way to go?
Right. Well, look, from a Department of Defense perspective and an intelligence perspective, our government should be looking at this from a national security perspective. But there's a whole lot of other, if you will, facets to this issue. And I do think we need a whole of government approach. I think we need to have the FAA and NASA and NOAA. I think we need to have also our academic institutions and our scientific community all involved in this, and then maybe we can start finding some answers. I don't think it is the purview of our national security apparatus to give us answers on things that aren't necessarily national security related. Frankly, I don't want my government telling me what I should think about something. I want my government to provide the facts and then allow us as the people to make our own determination on what this means. Ultimately, this is a topic that impacts everybody equally and yet differently, depending on perhaps the way we were raised and some of our philosophical and theological views. So I do think a whole of government, frankly, maybe a whole of society conversation about this.
Luis Elizondo, thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much. We'll stay tuned.
My honor and privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.